All right. Hi, everyone. We're here with Adam Rodriguez, who is the author of Know That You Are Worthy Experiences from First Gen College Grads. And this is a nominee for Catalyst Award for Best Nonfiction. So, Adam, hi. Thank you so much for taking time today to talk with me.
Thank you for having me. And can I mention, by the way, this is the first time in my life I've been nominated for an award.
Oh, okay. All right.
I
First
know.
time, and maybe it will be the lucky time. We'll see.
We'll see, but
Um,
one way or the other, I can honestly say that I am happy to be nominated.
Yeah, and it's a cool award to be nominated for because we
For
don't we
sure.
don't like BS with First Gen and Juice. We only pick like great nominees. So,
Yeah, okay, thank you.
um, I want to talk about the book, but first, can you tell us just a little bit about yourself, your background, like what you do in your day to day, and then how this book came to be?
Sure. I'm a clinical psychologist first and foremost. I'm in private practice and I do teach. I used to teach full time and now I teach adjunct. I taught full time. I lived in California for a very long time. Grew up in mainly born in Ohio, mainly grew up in California. Went to college, graduate school there, and then practiced for a while. Taught full time at a school in San Mateo called Notre Dame de Namur University. And I mention that because it'll come up in a few minutes. And then I moved to Portland, Oregon about 6 years ago. The book came about for a couple of different reasons. Well, I guess a few different reasons. First and foremost, I'm a first generation college student, first generation undergraduate college student, first generation graduate college student. And so there was always that awareness, that sort of presence that this is meaningful to me in some way, shape, or form. The other couple of things that influenced it were I was invited to do a chapter of a clinical psychology book called The Handbook of Private Practice. And the
Mhm.
format of the book was they gave me, I think it was 6 or 7 prompts. And they said, reply to these prompts in one brief chapter, about 2,500 words, because we're doing this book on private practice and we want a small chapter for different niches within private practice. And we've identified this niche for you and write a brief chapter. And there was something about the format of that I really liked, that it was going to be a collection of a lot of different voices, giving their experience while following specific prompts. So there was kind of this uniform structure with a lot of individual voices. And I liked that. And for some reason, the thought occurred to me that wouldn't that be great to do that with first generation college students, to be able to get them to tell their story. I had seen a few other books. Trio has a book. I don't remember what it's called now, but Trio has a book. It's a really small book of individual narratives from students, and they're really wonderful. It's a gorgeous book. What I noticed about it was every story was different. It followed no structure, and that was really great for what it was. I thought it would be interesting to complement that by having one that had a little bit more of a structure so that students could use it almost as a resource guide. Oh, okay, I'm thinking about applying to college now, and I'm just going to read that right now. I don't want to read this whole book. I'm just going to read a bunch of those stories, and maybe those grab me or something like that. But there was something that was really attractive to me about I want everyone to tell their own story. And maybe I think about this because I'm a psychologist, right? You come into the office and I just say, tell me what's on your mind. And then people can sort of tell the story the way they want to tell it. There's a tiny bit of structure, but more or less they're open to tell their story in their own narrative. So that was the origin of the book. That's sort of where it started from. And there's one small point I want to correct you on. You said that I'm the author of the book. I'm the editor of the book.
Oh,
There are 32 authors to this book. I guess 33. I do write a few chapters in it, but it's 31 first generation college graduates who are the authors of the book, and it's their stories that make up like the overwhelming majority of the book, and one additional individual, Yolanda Norman, who wrote the foreword to it. So it's those 32, and then I wrote a little bit as well.
yeah. Oh, yeah, thank you for that correction. The editor of the book, not the author, and it is very cool because it brings over 30 stories together. that each have their own viewpoint. And for me, something that I really liked about the structure of this is like a lot of times when you see academic things about first gens, it's just kind of bunching everyone together. And even like if you try to pull out a strand, like if you try to look for literature about Black first gens, it doesn't really exist. It just hasn't really been done enough. Although that's going to change because I know LT is coming out with a book pretty soon on that. But
Yes, yes, I
there's
remember her call for chapters.
yes, she's doing the Lord's work on that one. But
Yeah.
there's it's hard to find info about um like what that diversity of experiences is like. And something I really like is that it brings so many different experiences, perspectives, challenges, strengths into the mix. So how did you get these 31 people to write these chapters?
Oh my gosh. First and foremost, I love these 31 people. Like, oh my gosh, I get tearful thinking about them. I adore these individuals. It really was like just looking for every single avenue I could possibly find to find first generation college graduates. In terms of finding them, it was a collection of different things. It was internet searches for university first gen centers. They might do an alumni profile on their webpage, and I would get names that way and reach out. I would find people from other books who had contributed in various different forms. What I knew from the beginning was that I really wanted this to be mixed. I wanted people who went to Ivy League schools, prestigious universities, state schools. I wanted people who had gone to community college first. I wanted people who are non-traditional age college students. I wanted HBCUs to be represented. I really wanted to get as big and vast of a cross-section of different university experiences as I could. And there's so many books that concentrate on a specific type of college experience, right? Anthony Abraham Jack has this brilliant book, The Privileged Poor, which was a major resource that I use in it. I adore that book. I adore his work. It is phenomenal. It's really focused on Harvard and Ivy League schools. And so it does a great job of communicating that experience. He goes really in depth with that. My idea was, let's do a big cross section, so it's going to not have the same amount of depth that Dr. Jack was able to go into, but let's do a really big cross section. So when that happened, then I said, oh, okay, well, if I need an HBCU, let me start reaching out to HBCUs and just start emailing them. Let me email the Ivy Leagues, and I would go to like their trio department, student services, dean of students, whomever I thought was most likely to have resources. I reached out to Dr. Jack. I said, hey, do you know anybody? Paul, and I never know how to pronounce his last name, I think it's Toff, wrote a really wonderful book that I think everybody should read called The Inequality Machine. He featured a handful of students in it, so I reached out to him as well, and he connected me with Yvonne Martinez, who has a chapter in the book. By and large, consistently, so many people were interested in doing it. And then, of course, it's just a matter of who has the time, who has the ability. Everyone's busy, everyone's extended. And I think I think I sent invitations to 90 something people, and that's what got me the 31 respondents. So, I searched through Twitter. I just searched like first gen hashtags, and I just started DMing people. Like, if you had your DM opened, I was sliding in, and I was saying, hey, this is my project, this is what I'm working on. If you're interested, email me, let me know. I got a couple of people that way.
Wow, that's amazing. I love it. It's like grassroots efforts.
I didn't know another way.
Yeah, but I think it's great. It's approachable. I wonder if, I mean, did any of the students feel like, I don't know, can I do this? Can I write something for an actual real book? Or did they have,
Oh, for sure.
yeah.
I will say a number of the contributors are academics. So for them, I think they were accustomed to writing and publishing. And that does make it easier because they're already sort of in that mode or that way of saying, I should be writing and I should be producing. And they sort of have a kind of a permission for it, which I think is important for a lot of people, but I think especially for a lot of first gen students. But many of the others who weren't academics, maybe they worked at a university, but maybe they worked outside of one, there was a lot of that type of response. And I think it was striking to see because I was getting an expression from a lot of people saying, gosh, I don't know if I'm worthy. I don't know if I could do it. And I'm feeling it back. I can't believe you're trusting me to like edit and tell and represent your story in a way that feels
Mhm.
okay to you. And so there was this kind of like reciprocal, let's do this together. Let's figure this out together. And the people who did contribute chapters, what they wound up getting to me, I mean, there wasn't a lot of editing. And
Mhm.
the editing that I normally did, I think really was influenced by me being a psychologist. Like a lot of the editing that I did
Mhm.
was I'd get a chapter and I'd say, oh my gosh, this little sentence right here is so evocative and powerful. Can you embellish on this? Tell me more. I want to know about this part of it. I want to know about that part of it. Like, don't leave me hanging.
Mhm.
Tell me more about this. I would say 90% of the content editing that I did was that. There
Mhm.
were very few people where I was kind of like, well, we got to trim you for size. Most of the time
Mhm.
it was like, let me pull some more out because I just heard you reveal something which I think is really going to touch a lot of students.
Yes, that's so interesting because when LT and Georgina Guzman and I were working on our edited text, I had a few students that I had worked with who were recent college graduates, so probably very similar as far as like age, also first gens. And it was very similar because I think they were so
Yeah.
afraid. They were like, oh, nobody wants to hear that, this or that, or it's
Yeah.
gonna sound like I'm just complaining. And I'm
Yeah.
like, baby, speak your truth. Like, this is it. Like, when are you
Yeah.
gonna have a chapter in a book that's just for you to talk about the things that like you've been talking to me about for 4 years, but it's like now, tell the people, tell the world. And it's so funny how they'll have this one line that seems innocuous to them, and you just got to tell them like that's
Yes.
actually brilliant and you need to say more about it. And like that process they go through of realizing their stories are worthy of being
Yeah.
told completely, not like,
Yeah.
this guarded version that they think they have to give people. So interesting that you bring that up. One of the things that you do at the very beginning of the book, obviously, is you have your intro, you talk about the structure of the book, and a lot of the framing of it. And this is where like I definitely felt the psychiatry energy only because I think the whole introduction is addressed to you. And so it's like just like the title, like you are worthy and you will see this, you will experience that. Why did you want to write that introduction like in the second person like that?
Yeah. Yeah. It was definitely a conscious choice.
Mhm.
And it was one that I didn't necessarily know at the beginning that I had permission for.
Mhm.
Because there's this feeling that, oh, this is supposed to be academic, right? And undergrads hear this all the time. You should write this way, never write in the first person, always write
Mhm.
in the third person, always write this way. There's such this like normative kind of way of writing, which I really loathe and detest. And I think it's normative within a particular model. And I think it's representative of the first gen experience in that
Mhm.
first gens may come and they may want to express themselves in a different voice, which because there are these sort of pedagogical systems that are ingrained in institutions, they say, no, you have to do it that way. And so they sort of stifle and limit these voices, which I think could be really powerful. But for me, this book was okay. I think faculty and staff could really gain something from reading this book. I want them to read it. Faculty and staff have access to all sorts of data and academic articles. I want them to hear an
Mhm.
individual story. But
Mhm.
to me, it was for first gen students. That's who the book was for and to. And in my head, I was saying, okay, that's going to include like freshmen and sophomores in high school who are
Mhm.
thinking about college potentially. It's certainly going to include some juniors and seniors in high school. It's going to include some current college students in any year, and it's going to include maybe some people who never went to college and are older or dropped out of college, didn't continue and are older. How do I write something for them?
Mhm.
And in a way, the idea of writing it in second person became very natural because as I wrote, there was this feeling that I just want to talk to you. I want to say
Mhm.
something to you. The
Mhm.
last thing that you mentioned before the other question had something to do with this idea of like, how we find commonality in experiences.
Mhm.
And that's the part that always really stood out to me, was like, first gen students, big diverse group of individuals, and there's a type of a kinship and a sense of connection though. And what I think I have found so consistently is that we all don't go through the same struggles, but we may have very similar underlying feelings about our struggles. We may experience very similar senses of not belonging and isolation and loneliness and lack of permission, etc. And so in that sense, it felt to me like this was a shared experience. And I think in that sense, second person felt appropriate. And there are times in which, I'm saying we as well. I have a couple of chapters where it's like I'm saying first gen students, blah, 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 blah. But more when I'm speaking to people, there's a you or we sort of a sense to it.
Yeah, I'm laughing because I get in trouble for writing we in my dissertation
Yeah.
sometimes. And my chair will be like, she calls it the royal we,
Yeah.
like we like educators or something. And she's always giving me crap about that. Amy, if you watch this, I'm sorry. I just have a flair for the dramatic, but I'll fix it, I promise.
Yeah.
Um, no, I like what you said about, the commonality that we find, because I think one of the criticisms of these types of narratives or counter stories is like it's just one story. It's not generalizable. It's not this and that. You can't replicate it, like whatever. And I feel like people have this assumption that it's going to be very like black and white and very binary, like, oh, this is the experience of this person, this race, gender, sexuality, hometown, like class, whatever. And more often than not, what you actually find in these individual stories is all of the intersections.
Yeah.
Um, and
Yeah.
so my next question for you is, what are some of those themes that kind of popped out at you as you're looking at these 31 stories?
Uh, yeah, sure. There were plenty. Some of them I kind of alluded to. I think
Mhm.
one overarching one that seems like it was really there consistently was a sense of belonging or not. Um, and this one I think was particularly noteworthy to me, how so many people were expressing this feeling of, I don't know if I belong. I don't know if this is the right place for me. I don't know if I should be here. And I'm differentiating that from like people talk about imposter syndrome. And I sort of get that. And I understand imposter syndrome, but this isn't that. This, what I think is different about this, and I want to be sure to clarify what I mean by this, which is to say that in many ways we don't belong. And what I mean by that is not that we don't have the ability or the talent or the acumen. Absolutely we do. Like hands down, that's never been a doubt to me. What I mean is I think an often ignored aspect of the first generation experience, at least in the research that I found, and I think this is changing, but at the time that I wrote the book, or edited the book, what I found a lot of was this realization that it's not that first gen students are having all these hardships because they have all these deficiencies. I think that's a simplified and reductive and inaccurate way to look at it. I think a better way to look at it is they're coming into an environment like an immigrant, like they're coming into a culture that's not built for them. It's built and designed for continuing generation students who are usually white, middle, and upper class. And that's a point that I really try and make in the book is college, I mean, originally was designed for white affluent men. And a lot of those traditions and pedagogies that were established then, 100 plus years ago, we still follow to this day because they've been handed down to us as traditions. They don't necessarily fit the wider body of people who are entering into college now. And so it's very common for a first gen student to come in and feel like, I don't know if I belong here. And in a way, what they're feeling is valid, not only because they're feeling it, but also because they are entering into a system that is not designed for their skills and their talents, their experiences, their abilities. It's designed for a different group of people, right? It's designed for people who already have the nomenclature and understand the language and verbiage that's being used. So many stories touch upon aspects of jargon. And that was a commonality that was so striking to me. I can't remember who it was. I want to say it was Kevin who told the story of like going in and one of the assistants said, "Oh, speak to the chair." And Kevin was like, "Oh, okay." And he took a chair, a piece of furniture, and he's like, "I'm not gonna talk to a chair, you idiot. What are you telling me?" And I think I mentioned this in the book. I was interviewing, I had a doctorate and I was interviewing for a tenure track position. And they asked me something about a provost role. And I was like, I do not know what a provost is. I have spent 12 years in higher education. I don't know what a provost is. Office hours, department chairs, provosts, deans, all of these different types of language and meanings that are barriers to people when our parents didn't come up with that system. They're not exposing us to that regularly, early and often throughout our life. The ways in which we write, is third person okay? Is first person writing okay? Second person? All these different norms and expectations. Approach your professors, go to office hours, right? Number of students talk about that. No, I was raised, you don't go to the professor, that's kissing ass. That's not okay. You don't do that. You don't suck up. You sit down, you put your head down, you work hard, and you go for it. And the professors are like, no, you are supposed to come and form a meaningful relationship with me. And so all of those different barriers, I think, get exposed in these different ways. And I think that they result in the students feeling like, I'm not sure if I belong here.
You know what? It's funny because I feel like it extends even into, I mean, grad school, of course, but then into the professional world because there are so many words. I mean, I work in higher ed and I still don't really know what a provost is or a chancellor
Yes.
or a birther. I mean, what's the birther? Has anyone watching this ever met a birther? Like, if so, send them to me. I want to know what they do and if it's a real job or not, because I'm convinced it's not. But
I have
I
a
feel
vague
like
idea what they do, but only because of Hamilton.
I could not tell you. Is it money? Is it class
They do something
schedule?
with money. They handle the financials.
Hold
And
on.
Lin-Manuel Miranda taught me that.
Should we look this up right now? We're gonna
Sure.
pause to have an educational moment for the audience. Okay, first of all, here's the problem. This is a British or Scottish. No, no, no. This is a British word. That's why we don't know
Sure.
it.
Okay.
Wow. What you said, it was just too real, Adam, because literally we're using a British word from like, probably the 1800s to talk about this. But yes, it's a person who manages the financial affairs of the college. All right. Still don't really know what that means, but they do something with money.
Right? Are they like a CFO for a
Yes,
university or
all of
something?
those words. Maybe. All right, this is a puzzle that I'm gonna need to crack later on. I think it's probably the person that manages the financial aid department all the way up, like all the tuition, all the payments they're receiving.
So
I really don't know.
I put a glossary in the book, right? Just for this very reason. I put a glossary
Oh,
in the
so
book.
off.
And I
Oh
did not
my
include
goodness.
bursar.
Ooh, okay.
That's my bad.
They manage student billing, is what
Oh,
Indeed.com is telling me.
okay.
So there's two things. There's like a bursar's office, and that's where you like set up your payment plan, you go
Sure.
pay your tuition, and then there is actually usually a bursar who is like the king of that area, I guess, at the college. Anyway, look, we are still learning words, we're still learning things. I think a few years ago, I had a boss who was like, "Oh, can you go grab the tablecloth from my office? It's just right in the veranda or something." And I was like,
Yes.
"No, or was it veranda? No, it was a different word." Oh my God. I was like, I don't know what that is. And I'm like in her
Yes.
office looking at all her shelves, just being like, I don't want to dig through all her stuff, but like which one is the one? And it was the same thing the first time I heard the word dongle. Like, the thing that connects your Mac to like, I don't know. I just
Is
know
that what that is?
it's the
I've
little
heard that word.
chingadera, that's what I'm calling it. But they call it
Okay.
a dongle. And that's the name for it. But imagine the first time you hear that, you know, your boss is like, "Oh, I'm gonna bring you the dongle over later." Like,
Yeah.
okay, sure. Great.
And now you have students, right, who are 17, 18, 19 years old or older, coming onto campus already overwhelmed, already feeling othered, already feeling different. A lot of times for BIPOC students, feeling like there's nobody around them that are like them or look like them. For lower class, for students from lower class black backgrounds, feeling like there's nobody on campus that's like me. And now you're getting all of these foreign words and language, and you have no idea what's going on.
And not to mention the acronyms.
Yes. And
And
I
you
think
don't know if the acronym
this
is
is,
an acronym or a word. Like,
that's
that's
right,
a lot.
right? Trio, Avid.
Mhm,
I think these are things that create barriers.
mhm,
And often the people who are perpetuating and maintaining them don't even realize they're doing it. It's just second nature for them to use it. Some of them, I think, probably do and use it for that reason, but
mhm,
many don't. But automatically there's that feeling of, I don't get this, I don't get that, I don't get this. And you're feeling like, I
mhm,
don't belong here. This isn't home. I'm not comfortable here. The
mhm.
people are different. The food is different. The music is different. The classes are different. The language is different. Everything.
Everything is, I remember going to my orientation for grad school and walking in the building, and there was like there were people greeting you like, "Oh, hi, welcome. We're so excited to have you." And
Mhm.
there was no sign or anything telling you like where to go.
Uh-huh.
And yeah, and there's like this huge auditorium in front of me. There's like a hallway, there's stairs, you know, I'm like, I
Mhm.
didn't know. I think had just turned 22 or something. Like I was still a
Mhm.
baby. And I was just so physically uncomfortable. And
Yep.
like I was paralyzed. I just sat down in the hallway because I was like, this is where I'm most comfortable, literally
Feeling.
on the floor in this hallway. Right. And I
Yeah.
feel like people like even the physical experience of walking around a campus can
Yeah.
be so disconcerting the first few times that you do it because it doesn't look like where you're from, what you're used to, and
Yep.
everything has funny names on top of it.
Funny names, and the systems are different, right? So you could get us, you could get information about a professor's office location, this building, this room, and students assume that's where the class is. Not understanding that the classes are different in different rooms, and this way of having to navigate a system with an expectation that you will know it when there's no reason that you should.
Yeah, I think it takes a toll on these students. It's just taxing, and people overlook the kind of how it chips away at you. It's not
Mhm.
necessarily one big thing, but it may just be like your entire day is a little bit extra exhausting. Like it's like
Yes.
it's like tying your shoelace and then, you know, 10 steps later you look down and it's
Yep.
untied again. And it's just kind of
Yep.
like that all day.
Yep.
Um, all right. I feel like okay, this is Adam, this has to be like some therapy tricks because I feel like I'm starting to like remember things and get a little bit triggered about like all my college memories, but
Uh-huh.
let me pull it together. Um,
Let me mention really quick, I don't know how this works. I know that we're recording. On my end, you've frozen your video. Your audio is fine.
well,
And I don't know if that impacts the recording or not.
uh, I still see myself moving, so I think it should be
Okay,
okay.
cool. All right,
I hope.
that
We're gonna
works.
keep our fingers crossed. I mean, most importantly is that they want to hear you. So if I'm frozen, it's okay.
Okay.
Um, but yeah, whew, all right. Other thing I wanted to ask you about was the definition of first gen that you give, and like a little context that I came into this with is anytime you read an academic article about first gens, it's like a first gen is a student where neither parent has completed or like completed a 4-year degree or whatever. And a lot of times they use like the trio definition, and I've
Mhm.
always found that to be extremely limiting and not really getting at the heart of what a first gen is. And I feel like you
Mhm.
captured it so perfectly. So can you talk a little bit about why you wanted to provide that definition and why it was
Yeah.
important for you to specify the definition you're using throughout this book?
Yeah, especially I think the last question I think is especially important because I talked to so many different people, and I talked to one individual who had a parent who completed a college degree in a different country. And, there was, which forced this sort of question of like, does this qualify or does this not qualify? And I think what it did was it really forced me to sort of question, well, what is it that I'm trying to get to? And what is it that I'm hoping to capture? The reason I think the last part of your question is so incredibly important is because I really strongly believe that of the many different changes that universities and colleges need to make to better support first generation students, I really firmly believe that it has to begin with a very clear and operational definition. I think you have to sit back and sort of say, what is it that we're trying to accomplish? Because it can get really convoluted and it can get really messy. And you could find a university who likes a broader definition because that could benefit them. They could show higher first generation enrollment. They could, in some way, sort of demonstrate something about themselves, which on paper makes them look good, even though in reality, they may not really be providing the services that are necessary or needed. So to me, it begins with, if you're going to really sort of be of service to a first generation student, whether you're a university or whether you're editing a book, I think it really begins with this idea of what is it that we're talking about precisely? Like, how do we think about, how do we understand who people are and what we're trying to capture? And so I saw, are you still there? If you are still there on your end, you are not on mine. And I don't know what that means. Yep, I show one participant. Hello.
All right. You were right. It was like not feeling it, but it's back. It's still recording. So actually gonna well, we could leave this in. We'll have a little interlude for the people.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay, so you were talking about what colleges how colleges kind of determine these definitions, and that's where I lost you. So
Oh,
uh
sure.
yeah, can you pick it up from there?
I don't remember everything that I said, but I think the heart of it was this idea that if you are going to do something in service of another, in service of first generation students, it should be very clear what that means and who you are including. I don't think that you can really do anything that's not self-serving, that's actually in the interest of others, unless you very clearly say, what is it that we're trying to capture and why? And so as I'm reading, and I'm reading all sorts of different resources, right, to do the sort of the intro, which is kind of like a lit review. And I am reading just a ton of different studies and websites. And what I'm noticing is the numbers for first generation students vary, the definitions vary, the statistics and demographics vary. There's all sorts of variance. And what's behind that, I think, is the definition. Like, what are you actually trying to include?
Yeah.
And so as I continued to read, I read from this one book that cited Davis that really what they were expressing was what distinguishes someone in a meaningful way is, did you grow up in an atmosphere, in an environment in which the culture, that cultural capital of what college is well understood, right? And at one point in the introduction, I make a comparison to travel, right? Like you travel somewhere to another country, you don't really speak the language, you don't really understand the customs and the values, so you're kind of always uncomfortable and you're never really at ease. And if you think about that same sort of metaphor, if you are traveling to Italy and you don't know Italian and you've never been there before, it's going to be uncomfortable, it's going to be hard. If you're traveling to Italy and your parents are Italian, it's going to be so much easier than if your parents are not. They're going to expose you in ways that are big and small, in ways that are explicit and implicit, in ways that start, I believe, before conception. They're going to set a framework and a foundation of the culture of college. And parents who completed a little bit of college don't really hit that mark. Maybe they complete it 1 year, maybe they complete it 2 years.
Yeah.
From a consistent basis, to really have that body of knowledge,
Mhm.
what Davis is arguing, and what I agree with, is you have to have a 4-year degree. You have to have gone through the entire process to complete a degree of 4
Mhm.
years, whatever that means, however you obtained it, whenever you obtained it.
Mhm.
Now you have a degree of cultural capital that you have earned, and that
Mhm.
can be imparted to somebody. That's the difference between, in my
Mhm.
opinion, and Davis's, between a first generation student and a not a continuing generation student, is people who can guide, mentor, advise, nurture, develop, because they have that experience and that wisdom and that knowledge.
Mhm.
So, oh yeah, here's what a bursar is. A bursar is, because you're texting, what the hell is a bursar? And they're like, bursar just handles the financials.
Yeah.
You know, whereas like we're sitting there in the hallway just going like, I am overwhelmed. I don't know what's going on.
Oh my gosh. Well, I thought that that section was so helpful because I'm actually writing a section for my dissertation, like very similar, very introductory context on first gen students. And it's the most frustrating couple paragraphs I'm trying to write because I'm like, no one can agree
Yes.
and nobody's using the definition that I want to use. And I feel like it was so helpful to actually read the introduction and be like, okay, there's an example of this out
Yeah.
there,
Yeah.
that makes sense to us that are actually first gens, I think. Um, so one of the examples I thought of when you were talking is from Gilmore Girls. Have you seen this show? It's like
I have
early
not.
2000s. Okay,
I
it's
have
okay.
never
You
seen Gilmore Girls.
hot take, like you're not missing that much, but
Okay.
Gilmore Girls, it's three generations, right? The parents, the well, I guess the grandparents are like extremely wealthy and like I think the moms and like the daughters of the American Revolution, they're like they
Oh.
live in Connecticut. They're,
Mm.
they're just that. They're very affluent. They have help at their home, all that stuff. And the mom in the story got pregnant when she was 16 and moved out and now she has a 16-year-old daughter. And around the time the show starts, they're kind of back in touch with the grandparents. And so there's this shift between a home that has a college going culture in the sense of like she is talking about going to college all the time and she's supported and her mom is like, yes, you should definitely go to college, let's do this, let's do that. um and then the grandparents where they have the connections and the and like the things that will definitely make her life easier. And the reason I bring it up is because I've had debates with people about whether the 16-year-old, when the story starts, her name's Rory, um, like whether she's a first gen or not. It's a debate. I don't know. If y'all are watching this, you can put a comment about whether you think Rory is a first gen. I'm sure the debate will go on forever. but
Rory's the
yeah.
girl, the youngest generation.
What's that?
Rory is the girl, the youngest generation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a puzzler.
Well, I haven't seen the show, so I won't really offer an opinion because if I do, somebody who's like well versed in the show will be like, because, and I'll be like, well, okay, that's fair. I've never seen the show.
Yeah, they can't do that. I watched it in like the year 2000. Like my memory doesn't go back that far, but
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I know the basics. Speaking of Rory, Gilmore Girls, Adam, do you have any favorite pop culture, like first gen icons from a book, from a movie, TV show?
Okay, so I had known you were gonna ask me this, and I really thought about it
Yeah.
because um there wasn't somebody like immediate in mind. And you had given me a couple of examples, right? And I
Yeah.
was like, yeah, those make sense, but those weren't the ones that sort of resonated with me. And as I was thinking
Mhm.
about it, I realized a little bit why that was, and I realized what my reference was. And I think why it was because um, I graduated high school in 1993, right? So I'm crazy old. And what that means, though, for this conversation is we didn't know what first generation, we didn't use first generation language.
Mhm.
That was not a thing. It certainly has become far more prevalent. When I started the research for this book, I think I started this book in 2015. There was very little literature, and there's much more now. But in 1993, we didn't talk about first gen. So when you had representation on television, that was emphasized in a very subtle way. And so I realized
Mhm.
what I touched
Yeah.
upon what was the thing that sort of connected me was I loved A Different World.
Yes.
And I think I loved A Different World because not just, I think that there was a first gen student. I think Dwayne Wayne was a first gen student. I remember that as far as I remember, his parents were like blue collar. They weren't professionals. And I know that there was Whitney who I think wasn't. She
Whitley.
sort of came from a lineage, right? Yeah.
Okay, yeah,
And
LT's gonna kill me if I don't correct you. Her name's Whitley,
Whitley, oh
not
my God,
Whitney.
I called her Whitney. Oh, Whitley, yes, yes, yes. Okay, so
Okay,
I'm
go
sorry,
ahead.
LT. I'm sorry, LT. That is a function of not having seen the show for 30 years.
Yes, for you
So
too.
Whitley,
Yes.
and by the way, Jasmine Guy's album, go get it if you don't have it because it is so good.
Okay.
Um, I love that album. But Dwayne Wayne, I think was. But what I loved about it, what was really meaningful to me was that was my glimpse into what college was. I had no way to conceptualize it, right? I didn't know or understand what it was. And I remember that Animal House had come out like when I was young and probably watched that at an inappropriate age. But that didn't connect to me because it was like a bunch of like rich white kids partying at a college. And so that didn't really tell me, oh, this is like college. Like A Different World to me was, first of all, it was like an HBCU, so like Black professors, like people of color all throughout the show, dealing with issues that felt relevant and meaningful. Wasn't just a bunch of parties, it was people like striving. It was a lot of relationships and dating and some soap opera-ish content, but it was like this glimpse into a world that I didn't know. I think I might have lost you again.
All right, my Wi-Fi is betraying me tonight. We'll like edit this all together a little bit better. And I switched to a different network. I don't know how it works. My boyfriend set it up,
If
but
you don't want to talk, if you're done, I get it. I understand. I really like
no,
just let
I
me
would just tell you, you gotta remember, like Puerto Rican from the East Coast. I would just be like, all right, I'm done.
right, right. Okay, we're done. Bye.
Okay, you were talking about A Different World and how it shows college, and that's where I lost you right there. So,
Yeah, it was like I don't remember, like I was too young, like when I watched the show. I was a teenager when I watched the show. So I don't remember it like I remember it addressed a lot of like topical issues. I remember, episode like a lot of episodes about race, about HIV. I remember it being very cutting edge in a lot of ways, but the way that it felt so, which I think is cutting edge now, but like at the time, I didn't think of it as cutting edge. I thought of it as I didn't have a word for it, but it felt something to me. It felt powerful to me.
novel.
And yeah, like it was different. Like
Hmm.
it's showing Black kids at school with Black teachers like that wasn't on TV, you know? Like Welcome Back Kotter had a little bit of diversity to it, but like that's a different sort of a thing. Like I'm really aging myself here.
Sorry, I
A
don't get.
different
I've heard of that. I don't know what it is.
great theme song. And A Different World, great theme song, right? It was this way in which
Yeah.
like I'm not Black, but you know, there weren't Puerto Ricans on TV, outside of Chico and the Man. But but it was like this it was as close as I could get, you know?
Hmm. Yeah.
to this not white sort of sanitized experience. And here you are showing these kids going to college. Like, could I do that?
Mhm.
Like it was really, really awesome, I think is a great word for it. Like it was
Mhm.
such a powerful show and just, you know, all the love in the world to Debbie Allen too for that, because
Mhm.
I think what she gave, you know, and the complications of Bill Cosby too, but what she gave to people, I think is enormous.
Yeah, I'm a huge Different World fan, and I feel like you're right about Dwayne, where it's kind of like a first gen coded character
Yeah,
because I didn't hear that term until I was like well out of college. I mean, there certainly was
yeah,
not a first gen center or any staff that worked with first gens when I was in school. And I graduated from college in 2005. So
right.
like it was probably only like 10 to 15 years ago, probably maybe 10 years ago that I started hearing the term,
Yeah,
right? So I feel like there are a lot of characters where you're like, they I think feel like they're first gen. They just kind of are
yeah,
giving me like that energy. It's like the one character that always has to work or that like doesn't really know how like what's going on in college. And you kind of get that sense like yeah, they're
yeah.
probably gen. Yeah.
And Dwayne he was kind of a nerd,
Yeah.
and I need the glasses.
Yeah.
And he went on to become a teacher. I don't know if he was a
Mhm.
professor or not, but like he went on to become a teacher. It's like that was so cool.
Mhm.
Like, I loved
Like
that.
this. Well, I feel like it shows you kind of like that bridge to being like a real adult, whatever that means. Like
Yeah,
when you're a kid, it's like, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I'm like, but what's this bridge to like being a grown up? Like, what's
yeah.
in between high school and like the grown up land that's over there? Right. And so I feel like those, for me, it was Moesha, by the way. I don't know what happened to the UPN programming these days, but you need to bring back the Moesha block because that
Is it
was where it
streaming
was at.
anywhere?
What's that?
Is it streaming anywhere?
Moesha streaming anywhere. It's
Because now I'm
gotta
gonna
be,
go look.
right? It's on Amazon Prime and Paramount. Apparently it's on YouTube also. All right.
Okay.
Well, I know what I'm doing tonight. Um,
Right? Nostalgia trip.
yeah, but the thing that blew my mind when I was watching it was Moesha and then like when the Fresh Prince went to college.
Yep.
Um, a lot of these shows they have like the student union and that fascinated me. And I just
Yeah.
remember like kind of that restaurant seating, you know, and everyone
Yep.
kind of hanging out there. And I was like, that student union, like, what is it? Like, just the term union, like what is that place? I don't know. It was like it's a magical world to me. It was like when they go to visit the elves in Lord of the Rings, like the student union, like I'm gonna see it one day, you know. And it's just so funny looking back because I'm like, it's just a bunch of people just killing time between class. Like it's
Yep.
just a place
Yep.
you sit. But to me, that was so wild that like there's this place called the student union that's just for students, and people go there and can get food and hang out and study. Like, wow.
Well, and if you look, you know, there's so many stories in the book too, where the student union becomes the place where people begin to connect.
Yeah, I know one of them. I think it's the very first chapter actually. It's
Anthony.
Anthony,
Yeah.
who's from uptown. He's from Washington Heights
Yeah.
and talks about this struggle in his first year and feeling like a failure, feeling like he doesn't belong. And then finding some belonging. I think it's in the Latin American Student Association.
Yeah.
Um,
Some sort of, I don't remember the specific name of his group, but yeah.
mhm. And just like the power of having community. I think his main struggle was like leaving
Hmm.
behind the community he had at home and not having anything
Hmm.
to replace it with.
That's right.
Um, and just that sense of like, I feel like first gen struggle with this sense of like push and pull between home and somewhere else, right?
Yeah.
Like we want to go to that magical place. We want to go to the student union, like whatever it is out there. But you, when you get there, you're like, oh, this was not made for me. And now what?
Yep. Yep.
Hmm.
I
One
want
thing I
to,
like, oh, go ahead.
oh, I'm sorry. If I could, I want to share one
Mhm.
of the quick thing that I thought about that it's not a specifically first gen, but it still touches upon a theme. And it
Mhm.
came to my mind when I was thinking about this question of representations in media. There is a scene that I love in Good Will Hunting And again, a sort of a student who's kind of, he's technically not in college, right? But he's kind of
Mhm.
even coded as like first gen orphan in a specific way.
Yeah.
But the scene that I'm thinking of that I loved was when he's turning down all these jobs and he's standing there at his construction job with Ben Affleck's
I
character.
knew you were gonna say this scene.
Yes.
Yes.
And Ben Affleck is like, fuck you, you're doing this for me.
Yeah.
You're not doing this for you. You have to do this. You have the
Mhm.
golden ticket. And if you don't cash it, that's an offense to me.
Mhm.
And what I think about with that is I think that there's a big dynamic with our parents that is similar to that. It's not as overt, and some of the sentimentality is certainly different, but and it can be a burden, right? It can be like I have to achieve for, like I think of Uli's story, Uli Morales, in the
Mhm.
book. He captures a little bit of this, like you don't belong here. I don't want you to be here. Like that's why my father who can work on cars and can build a house from the ground up intentionally didn't teach me those things. Intentionally didn't speak Spanish in the house. We can get into that. That's a whole other thing. But like there was this idea that I want to push you as hard as I can into something that is different from what I did and what I have. And that was hard for me to understand when I was young, just like it is for like Matt Damon's character in the moment. But I have so much love and respect for it now that like this idea that my parents had of like, no, you're doing this because this is the right thing to do and you shouldn't be here.
That's powerful. It really is. It's like
Yeah.
it's a lot of pressure, but
Yes.
it's also a lot of reward when
That's
you
right.
bring that diploma home.
That's right. That's right. It's so shared. And I know a couple of authors talk about that as well. But it is,
Mhm.
it's burdensome, it's heavy, it
Mhm.
can feel like too much at times.
Mhm.
So like, but at the same time, you also realize you're celebrating something that like on my home office, I have a picture of my father's hands on the wall. My father was a welder after the steel mills closed, and when you're a welder, you're swinging a hammer all day against metal, and so it damaged his hands, and his hands are deeply arthritic and just laced with microfractures. And they're better now that he's retired, but to me, they are the symbol, of I still can't hear Bill Withers' grandma's hands because they're the symbol of my parents, both of my parents, toils and struggles and sacrifices and efforts. My mother was a house cleaner, and I think about the things that they did with their bodies to provide something so that I didn't have to break mine. And they become these really powerful symbols of our achievements and the way that they're shared.
I love that. That's beautiful. I'm glad you brought up your parents because
Mhm.
my next topic is going to be going to talk about your hot take a little bit, Adam.
Wait,
In the
wait, say it again.
we're going to talk about your hot take in the introduction,
Oh
which
yeah,
is
yeah, yeah.
about the sorry.
No,
Um
we're good. We're good.
yeah, no sirve para nada. I know, okay, you know that though. Like I know your parents didn't teach you Spanish, but you know that. Um yeah, I'm glad you brought up your parents because one of the things that I think comes up a lot when talking about first gens is the family support. And so it's kind of like on one hand you have the family doesn't necessarily like have that knowledge about college and the hidden curriculum, but they're very, very, very supportive. And I think in particular, like the community cultural wealth model has become really, really popular. But your hot take in the introduction, which I loved, I'm here for it, um, was really that that's not enough because it's limiting because people are not just their strengths. So I'm going to give you a chance to say that better than I just did and kind of talk about why you wanted to bring that up in that introduction to frame the book.
Yeah, I don't know if I will explain it better, but I'll explain it the best I can.
Yeah.
Um, there's a parallel here, I think, to being a psychologist. There's certainly this big sort of like strength-based kind of idea that comes through in psychology a lot. Several different problems with it. In and of itself, the idea that we need to spend more time acknowledging, supporting, and celebrating individual strengths, absolutely, that is virtuous and the way that things should be. What I have found can happen sometimes is a couple of different things. Sometimes it feels pejorative and condescending. Sometimes it feels to me like it has a colonizer colonized kind of feel to it. Like almost like I'm getting a pat on the top of my head. Look at how good you are. You're doing so good, overcoming all of those hard things. It can have that feel. And certainly I'm not saying that that is intrinsic to that model, but I think the way it is carried out can sometimes be like that. But the thing is, like, you know, I'm a psychologist. I don't really believe that very much in the world is good or bad. I believe that most things are good and bad. I believe in nuance and complexity and depth. And I believe that we have to acknowledge that the strengths that I want to talk about, they're not like, oh, look at how well you persevere. Because to me, that feels like we're again not changing the system. I want to change the system. I don't want to take first generation students and make them continuing generation students. I want to make their children continuing generation students if they want to be, but I don't want first gen students to become continuing generation students. I want colleges and universities and post-secondary education to change its systems and structures to be more inclusive and hospitable to really the majority of who their students are now. And so I think a lot of strength-based is you are persevering, you have strength and fortitude and ability, and you are pushing through. And there's truth to that. You, as a first-gen student, have to persevere. And there is something to this idea of what can be referred to as the black tax. You have to work twice as hard to get half as much. You know, I don't want to co-opt that, but I do want to acknowledge that to be a first-gen student, you do have to do more. Not only because you might be working, you might be tending to family, but just the difficulties of being in that environment. You do have to do more. So yes, we're seeing strength, we're seeing perseverance, we're seeing resolve, fortitude, all things which I think are some of the things that make it to where I wouldn't want to not have been first gen. As hard as it was, those things contributed to my success. And I appreciate and acknowledge them. But I think to look at it from the way that I typically, and I say I because I don't want to like globalize this or generalize it. But the way what I usually see with strength-based models is very much a colonizer colonized idea. It's very much a, can you survive our system's hardships? And if so, here's your pat on the head for doing that. It doesn't acknowledge the fact that this is going to be hard. There are 31 stories in this book. Ain't none of them a story where somebody's like, this was easy as can be. And it's not because I discarded those stories. I didn't get those stories. I would have put that story in if it had appeared, but it didn't because it's hard. And so to ignore that, I think is foolish and it's insincere. And I think often my feeling is that is to make them more comfortable. The people who maintain the system, the people who continue in the system, it makes them more comfortable to not have to look at the challenges that they face and say, gosh, look at how well you're doing, how strong you're persevering through this. So from my perspective, I don't want this to be, do we do a deficit-based model or do we do a strength-based model? I wanted the discussion to be, these students come in with talents and abilities. And what we know is that on average, the statistics demonstrate that they face the following hardships. And this goes back to what we were saying before. What is the value of n equals 1? The value of n equals 1 is that when you look at the statistics for first-gen students, that's great to sort of macro design programs, but that intervention that you're going to do applies to 78% of your sample of 600 students with a p-value of 0.05. Like it doesn't apply to everyone. You can't do a catch-all. Humans aren't like that. People aren't like that. And we intersect. and intersectionality matters.
Mhm.
So my feeling was, if we're going to split it in between deficit and strength, we're missing the point. The
Mhm.
point of this is you're taking a group of talented individuals and putting them into an environment where they are struggling. Why?
Mhm.
It's the environment. The students aren't failing, the system is failing the student. And that was
Mhm.
more of my sort of perspective.
Well, I love it. And I'm gonna throw a little disclaimer in here. Y'all, no one is dragging community cultural wealth. That's like one example of a strengths-based model. And we're not saying what like any of these authors' intention is, but I think
Right.
it's more about like how these models are used at colleges,
Yes.
and how they're implemented. So we're not arguing that like first gen students don't have strengths or that they don't matter in college. So that's my
Right.
disclaimer. So I don't get internet hate. Just roll it back, listen to what Adam said, like slow it down if you have to, because we're just talking about something that we have that can be a starting point for us with first gens, but shouldn't be the ending point.
Right.
So that's my soapbox about that.
And you did say it better than I did.
No, you explained it way better. Like I gave the little blurb. Um,
I just used more words.
hey, it worked. Um, let's see, where should I go from here? I have my whole page of all the things that I was like, oh, maybe I'll ask him about this or that or
You are
this or that. I think
prepared.
one of the examples, and we'll like wrap up pretty soon. One of the examples that I really wanted to touch on, again, it's from the very first chapter, and Anthony talks about people asking him, why are you always working? And this was like so relatable to me because people ask that like they just think that your whole day is only college. And if you're a first gen, it really isn't. Even if you don't need to have a job, like your family's calling. Like you need to be home. You need to be
That's right.
mopping a floor or
That's
watching a
right.
kid or just there so they can keep an eye on you.
Mhm.
um and so I know that kind of ties in with like one of the themes that you talk about in the introduction is like the financial hardships, but also the work ethic, and the academic preparation. Um, were there any chapters that touched like mainly on their social interactions or their peer interactions?
Oh, outside of work or like with their friends and community?
Yeah, like their college, how they built up their college community or made friends or went to parties or any of those things. Sorry,
Anthony was
I'm making you pull back like all 31
no,
chapters from your
no,
brain.
this is great. I love it. Like I feel like I made 31 friends. Like
Yeah,
I just have so much love. Okay, so Anthony's chapter stands out.
yeah.
No, I'm not going to go through all of them, but let me give you a couple that I think really, really stand out. Anthony was one of them that I think was
Mhm,
really, really important in that regard. I think
mhm.
Stephen Santo Ramirez, he's the one, by the way, who gave us the title for the book, who gave me the title
Yeah.
for the book. I can't title things. If I were to title things, it would be like on the experiences of first generation students and
Yeah.
accumulated blah, 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 blah. Like I have there's no poetry in me whatsoever. Oh, T Mark too. Um,
T-Mark, we love
yeah.
T-Mark.
Oh yeah, T Mark. He definitely had that component of it from a slightly different perspective. Like somebody who struggled with that was Glynis because she was a non-traditional age student, and so her story is evocative in that regard. But
Mhm,
the person that I would really say was such Trisha's chapter, Patricia Harris.
mhm,
What I love about her chapter, first of all, editing Trisha's chapter was a nightmare because Trish has a powerful and unique voice. And I was
mhm,
terrified of stifling it, blunting it, or in somehow misinterpreting it when I edited.
mhm.
And here's the other thing, by the way, if you're a first gen person looking at this, I don't know about y'all, but when I was coming up, I sort of figured, people write a book, you sit down, chapter one, it was a dark and stormy night, and then, the end. That is not how the process works. It is circular, it is wavy, it is up and down. And I have been writing now postdoctorally, if that's a word, for about, I don't know, 12 years. Anything that I write now goes to a copy editor that I pay out of pocket, and the amount of red ink, figuratively, that comes back to me is insane. It takes a village, and they don't tell us that, right? Like, we just think, oh, you just sit down and you write it. It looks like this book right here, before it went to print, had 4 different copy editors. People went line by line to change grammar and syntax and usage. So I mentioned that because I think a little bit of looking at what goes on behind the curtains is really important. Trish's experience was so valuable because Trish went to an HBCU. Trish is a Black woman who went to an HBCU. And when I talk about the environment not being hospitable for first-gen students, Trish is the shining example of what happens when the environment is built for you. When the environment says, we will celebrate you. Go through Trish's chapter, and Trish basically walks into a campus that says, we are here to celebrate Blackness. And Trish walks into that experience and feels welcomed and feels at home. And there are so many different examples that she gives through the book. Music and people and literature and the people that they were exposed to in classes, food, it all made her feel like, I'm here, I'm home. Look, when Anthony talks about his experience, he's like, oh, it doesn't feel like the music is different, the people, the food is different. This isn't, this isn't Washington Heights. And Trish is like in this environment being like, this is an environment that says, we welcome you, we appreciate you, and we understand you. And I feel like it is such a powerful example of the social impact of being at college and why it matters so much to have community, why it matters so much to have a sense of belonging, why it matters so much to feel like you understand the people around you, they understand you. And then if you read Sean's chapter, right? Sean talks about walking onto campus the first day after orientation, being like, nobody looks like me. No, I don't know if anybody's going to understand me. And what a contrast between the two. So I think Trish is such a great example, not only of somebody who, really sank into that social life, but who demonstrates why that social life was so uplifting and powerful and important.
I love that for Trish, wherever she is.
Yes, she's the
Also,
best.
belated shout out to T Mark. You know we love you. You're out there in Arizona somewhere doing what you do. All right, Adam, I
T-Mark, by
have.
the way, wrote his chapter.
Mm.
He was one of the first 10 to write their chapter when I didn't yet have a book proposal finalized, like in 2016, maybe. And he didn't see this published until 2023. So props to him for his patience and his fortitude.
Hey, T Mark is the best,
Yeah, he
and his
is.
writing is so good.
Yeah, he's
So
special.
we love you. Or I think nowadays the kids are doing this, so I'll try
Yeah,
to do.
I won't even, I'll just throw up a West
No,
Side.
I just learned it. It took, a couple years of working in higher ed, but I finally learned it. But yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. Do you have any advice for like aspiring first gen authors who want to publish a book, and like if you want to talk about the process of getting a publisher and actually like bringing this to life as a physical book?
Yeah. This book almost died, I want to say about 4 times. It really only came to fruition through the fact that I just continued to work at it. I talk about this in the book because I do believe there's a later chapter, I think the conclusion, when I talk about the process a tiny bit. I do believe that we as first-gen students don't get a lot of exposure to the behind the curtain activities. And what I mean by that is you, and I mean you, Stephanie, but I also mean whomever is watching this, you can absolutely do it. You can absolutely do it. You have a voice, you have a story, and that's what's important. Yes, there are certain ways in which you have to work through the system to get things to fruition, but that's part of a sort of a bureaucratic structure. That's not anything to do with your talent or your ability. I never dreamed I could do something like this, never in a million years. And it absolutely took a village to do it. When I first developed the project, I didn't want to be the sole editor. So I approached 2 other people that worked on campus with me at Notre Dame de Namur. Very heavy first gen school. very diverse school, heavy first-gen population, big influence in why I want to do this. They have a student center there called the Dorothy Stang Center, which does a lot of student support services for first-gen and beyond. And so I approached some folks to do it there. They were interested, they were passionate, they liked the idea. They weren't able to after a while, they had to step back after a few months. Through no fault of anybody's, it just wasn't the right timing. Then I approached a colleague of mine, a really good and trusted and wonderful friend, and she felt the same way. I'd love to do this. Let's see what I can do. We began to develop ideas together, and then she had to step back. She had a kid. You know, certainly, you know, again, life happens, right? And I didn't want to undertake it on my own. Look, I adore the 32 people who contributed to this book, but it was like getting cats to march in a parade. Like, it is a major administrative task to corral 32 people, get their stories, edit their stories, get it back, edit that version, get it to the publisher. The very first draft of the book proposal that I did really just based upon my own sort of knowledge. And it was absolutely hot garbage. It was a dumpster fire. It was atrocious. And the fact that any acquisitions editor might have even read it is a tremendous, like, I don't know. It was probably torturous for them to read. It was really bad. It just was. And so I submitted it to a friend who had written a textbook. She worked at the university with me, so I was fortunate to have that connection. And I told her, I said, this is not about my ego. This is about getting something out that I think can help some students. So hack away at it and tell me what I need to do. And she lovingly said, this is a good idea. This is a great project. Here's what you need to do to make it better. And she did that with love and affection and tenderness and kindness. And she's thanked in the intro. And she was a major part of this book coming to fruition, because I could ask her, what about this? What about that? What about this? You got a book deal. What was your contract for? What did it, but I've never seen a penny. But that's not why we do this. But so I had some mentorship there, right? She was able to sort of tell me, this is what I did. Then I got a new book proposal. I found a book by a guy named, I think it's William Germano, called Getting It Published. And I read that. And that was an extremely helpful book. It was very informative. And I used it to structure how I thought about what the book proposal would look like. And then I began a very, very, very extensive research process of which presses, publication houses I should send it to. And that was through the advice of the book and my friend, Dr. Bakos. And so I started to do all that, and I created a spreadsheet of like top tier. It aligns with, this is a press that does this kind of work, higher education. Maybe they do stuff about first gen. Maybe they do stuff about whatever. It aligns with their interest, right? And based upon the book getting it published, I drafted I can't remember what it's called. It's called like it's not the actual proposal. It's called a letter of interest, something like that. And it was an email. And I started to cold email editors at publishing houses. And I kept a spreadsheet, email sent this date. Did I get a response back? And I sent it to, I don't remember the number now, but I think it was 49. I sent a book proposal to 49 publishers. So it does require perseverance. It does require like stick-to-itiveness. I sent it to 49. Of the 49, I think 2 asked to see sample chapters, which I sent. I sent, T Mark was always one of them. Sonia Ardoin. If you don't know Sonia, she's published a tremendous amount in first gen. She's a huge first gen scholar. And just go into Amazon and just buy everything that she's written or contributed to, because Sonia's really wonderful. And she was an early contributor to it. So I think Sonia, T Mark, and I want to say Desiree were the 3 chapters that I would send. 2 people saw that and passed. And then Roman and Littlefield, Mark Kerr, the acquisitions editor there, contacted me. And Mark said, let's do a Zoom call. I like your idea. And then Mark and I did a Zoom, and Mark shepherded my idea. And Mark is one of the most brilliant human beings I've ever met. I just, I am so fortunate to have encountered him.
Mhm.
Mark masterfully, like in a way that as a psychologist, I can only dream of being able to do one day, helped me find my own voice through his professional guidance, never overshadowing my voice, never putting words into my mouth, never telling me what to do, but guiding me to what the project could be. And then was such a cheerleader. And as a first gen student, I was really often off put. I would tell Mark, I go, I do not trust you. Why are
Mhm.
you so cheerleading and celebratory of little old me?
Yeah.
What do you want from me, you
Mhm.
bad, bad man? And then Mark would be like, because this book is brilliant, you're wonderful, and you're great. And I was like, I do not deserve that. And Mark really sort of took it and said, you have a seed. I'm going to make it into, an oak. And he was the one who was able to do that along with, Dr. Bakos and the other people that touched upon and edited for me. And that's sort of how it all came to fruition. I mean, that's the short version.
All right, y'all. So if you are trying to publish, like, I think the moral of the story is have some perseverance because it's not always going to just happen overnight by any means. And you will get feedback, and some of it will be amazing, some of it will be not great. Some of it will be from people who are just missing the point.
Yep. Yep.
And it's okay to ignore that feedback if you're like, they just don't get it. But don't give up if you get one no.
I mean, it's like
Um,
dating, right? Somebody can be a great person, but you just don't jive with them. And I think
mhm,
that's true with some of the publishing houses. Like they
mhm,
might have been like, yeah, this just isn't for us. Like this is fine. This isn't for us. And maybe there were
mhm,
some people who were like, I don't see it. I don't get it.
mhm,
It's hard not to take it personal. And there's a lot of times, like I remember texting one of my friends going, this is gonna happen. I gotta put this to bed now. This is a
mhm,
failed dream.
mhm. Well, how
So it was
many of the
Mark.
people working in those publishing houses are first gens themselves? Like, I
Yep.
don't know if they're in a position to necessarily like understand the value of some of the literature and
Yeah.
anthologies and things that people are putting forward. Um, because it's not a perspective. I would say probably like not that many are first gen in that world.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, but don't give up because we need these stories out
That's
there.
right. That's right. We need your voices.
Um, What is next for you, Adam? Do you have anything else coming out? Anything that we could look for?
Yeah, I have been going back and forth. I really enjoy writing about higher education. I really enjoy writing in this way. So I'll tell you where I'm at right now. One of the things that I really want to stress to all you first gen students out there as well is when you do something, however that comes upon your way, like that opportunity begets opportunities. So like
Mhm,
when this book came to fruition, people reached out to me. Like, here's an opportunity for this. Do you want to do that? Here's an opportunity for this. Do you want to do that? And I have a really hard time saying no. I'm working on that with my psychoanalyst. But like, so I have like 3 academic articles that I think are going to press this year. And those are in clinical psychology. One of them is on interracial couples and how white Latino couples can sort of fall into maintaining white dominant norms within the context of the relationship for each partner.
mhm,
So that's one article. Another article is on mixed race and mixed class subjectivity and our sort of binary ways of thinking about race and class. And it sort of leans on intersectionality and queer theory as theories that adopt more multitudinous and fluid models of identity and subjectivity. And
mhm,
then the other article is an article on the importance of uh, a, a psychotherapy for first gen students that works at depth as opposed to more behavioral models of therapy. And the argument is that one of the things that first gen students are contending with has to do with this bicultural experience associated with upward
mhm,
mobility. And
mhm,
so living within those two worlds of my past and my family, my upbringing, and these new opportunities that are making themselves available in the professional and the academic world creates sort of a split and a tension within individuals. And so psychotherapy then must be attuned to the whole individual. So I have some of those things, some conference stuff going on. And then here's the other thing about work begets opportunities. Roman and Littlefield, once this all finally went to press and they said, we have a release date for you, the very next email the next day is, what do you want to do next?
Yes. Love
Yeah,
that.
and it's like, I want to go to a beach in Vallarta and I want to, not think or write for a little while.
Yeah.
But that's an important part of this is like, I mean, it's almost like it's not nepotism, but it kind of is, like in the sense of like, I think that we want to believe in a meritocracy. Like if you accomplish something, it's because you're good, but if you don't accomplish something, it's because you're not good. I think we're good. I think we're all good. And now I have this opportunity where I don't have to do as much legwork for the book proposal, like getting it out there. I still have to write a good proposal. They're not just going to accept anything. But because now they know me, they're willing to say, what do you want to do next? And then Mark retired and somebody else stepped in who's wonderful. I love him. He was like, let's meet, let's talk about your ideas and let me help you shepherd them again. These people are brilliant at doing this. Like, and so we're talking and we're meeting, and the book that I would like to do next, I thought about doing a version of this book for graduate school, but again, cats marching in a parade. I don't necessarily want to go back to that for a little while. That was a lot of work. So the book that I think I'm considering right now would be about the sort of the psychological needs of first gen students, and I want to write it for faculty and staff at universities. When students have some sort of a psychological need, and I'm not talking about a quote unquote diagnosis or mental illness, I'm talking about just distress, angst, depression, anxiety, worry, indecision, doubt, curiosity. Very often the very first person they approach is a faculty member or a staff member at a university, not necessarily the counseling department, especially for those communities where mental health is still quite stigmatized. And so I think that it would be helpful to write a book for faculty and staff who are not trained in those functions, to be more aware and attuned to what those struggles may be like, what resources are available to them. So this book would be targeted towards university faculty and staff, not students, to sort of help and assist and understand not just the superficial stuff we think of with first gen students. Oh, are you having academic struggles? Are you having trouble making friends? But really looking at that intersection of race, ethnicity, class, and gender and sexual orientation and religion. And that sort of Jennifer Morton wrote a wonderful book called The Ethical Costs of Upward Mobility, which I really love. That thing that we never consider, right? The American dream is to be upwardly mobile. Great. It comes at a cost. And how do we understand what that cost is for us internally, and what that tension of all of these sort of competing internal identifications and counter identifications that we have are? How do we reconcile all of that, and what does that look like when it presents?
I love that. I think among faculty and staff, there's often so little awareness of a different experience, a different college experience. I'm gonna bring up something I found that you wrote that I'm like a little bit obsessed with. You wrote about the Beatles and how you had a friend that like did not understand how you could not just be obsessed with the Beatles.
Yeah,
Hot take, I don't like the Beatles. It's like fine. It's just kind of there. Like
yeah.
I think Celia Cruz deserves like all of the love that the Beatles have gotten, not just from Latin
Azúcar.
America, but from the globe. So when I saw this, I was like, I need to read this and see what this man has to say about the Beatles. And I felt so seen. I felt so seen to have someone else admit, like, the Beatles are okay. Like it is what it is. But I thought that was such a good example of, someone where they're not actively harming you, but if you're a professor, if you're staff at a college and you make these assumptions about someone else's experience, it just further alienates them,
Yeah.
and I think they don't always see it because the students don't speak up and say, "Well, hey, that's not my experience." And if they do, then it's just kind of like in one ear and out the other sometimes. Um, so I love that you're writing that because I think the best thing I've learned is like just shut up and listen and let them tell you.
Yes.
You don't need to tell them; they want to tell you, and let them set the boundaries, the goals, the what is it called? The posts, the mile markers, all those things.
Yep.
I don't know. I was trying to make a sports analogy, but then I was like, I don't know anything about like football, but you get the goalpost. Is that what it's called? Yes, the goalpost.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I love that. Let's see, a website or anything else you want to promote or send people to?
Um, my website is a split between my professional like clinical practice and the
Mhm,
book. I have a page for the book on
mhm,
my website, Rodriguez .com.
mhm,
If you go to the website, here's what I would suggest as a first gen student: go to the page for Know That You Are Worthy. There's 2 YouTube videos at the end. And the YouTube videos, I did Zoom panels with
mhm.
4 of the contributors for each one. Sean Richardson is in there, David Hernandez, T. Mark, Montoya is in
Yay.
there, Glynis Boyd Hughes is there,
Mhm,
Mitin Nguyen. Um, and there's 2 different videos. They're both about 75, 90 minutes. And it is each of them takes about 20 minutes and just talks something about their story. I remain convinced that like, and this is sort of like, this is to me the heart of the book is like, statistics and data are fine and good, but we can't rely upon them only. To get the emotional center of these stories, you have to hear people's voices and their
mhm,
experiences to give it color and texture and sound and prosody and meaning, right? It
mhm,
becomes music then instead of just numbers in a chart. It becomes some lived experience. And all
mhm,
of these people who share them, like go if you're a first gen student and just watch these YouTube videos and just listen to them talk about what their experiences were like.
mhm,
And my hope is that you will feel just a little bit less alone and a little more understood in who
mhm,
you are and what you're going through. You're not crazy, you're not alone in it, you're not imagining it, you're not causing it. It's an experience that is important to understand, but to also know that you're going to go through it in your own way, but some version of it is probably something that somebody's had before and had happened to them before. So I am very, very indebted to the people who contributed to this book, and a handful of them were willing to share their experiences in those videos, and I think that they're beautiful.
I love that. All right, y'all, go check out the book. It's called Know That You Are Worthy. It's got these 31 stories that are written by the contributors themselves, and it's really beautiful. It's something that you can just pick up and pull any chapter out of and just have a look at it, and I think feel a little bit affirmed as a first gen student. So check that out, and we will see you at the next book talk.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Adam.